we gather information for the primary planning elements, and we want to know, what do you have in savings and what's in your 401k, and do you add to your 401k, how much? And that's all important information in the primary planning elements. But what do you want it to do? What's the purpose of it? Welcome to Tell Your Boss I Quit with me, Pete Gutekunst, the podcast where we help you financially bridge from where you've started to the life goals you've imagined.
I'll ask you one question about the journal and kind of what you're thinking there, because I'm just trying to relate it to something that I saw when I was a kid, where my mom was relentlessly balancing the checkbook, every purchase handwritten in this, in basically a journal. Mm-hmm. And I feel like nowadays that is something that a lot of people my age just aren't doing. We're just trusting the transaction report on our bank account, and we're hoping for the best. How would a journal kind of step in and at least for the bigger purchases, as it pertains towards a goal? Yep. How would that journal kind of help with kind of organizing those?
That's exactly why I think the journal is so powerful, is because you get into the granular, the day by day. I'll ask somebody how much they spend, and I'm kind of looking for $5,000 a month or $10,000 a month, or, my mortgage is this and I spend that, whatever. And what I get is, well, the cable bill's like $200 a month. And no, that's going to blow your mind. And you're just going to get lost in the trees, basically, of the forest. And so that's where a journal, I think, is really helpful. Is it's important to keep your checkbook balance one way or the other, whether you're doing it by hand like your mom, or you're checking your app every day and making sure that there's enough money to write the next check. But what did you spend this month? Did you spend the $5,000 you normally spend, or did you spend $6,000 or $7,000? And why was it a couple thousand more this month, and then you're back to $4,000 to $5,000 the next month? And that's really where I think a journal is helpful. Is you might have some things one month that were really important that you did, and they went a little bit out of bounds, but it was good reason and you thought about it. There will be other things that you think your spending's $5,000 a month. And what ends up happening is some months are, the month your school tax are due, if you're not, escrowing it in your mortgage payment, that's always a month that's kind of out of whack. But then the other months follow that pattern. That's where this journal, I think, is really impactful. Is you can start to see a pattern of how much you're spending, and you can see where it goes a little bit above and beyond, and where, you have room where you could be saving a little bit. And that's what you start to put the purpose to dollars. That's the idea behind a journal.
Yeah. So what would you say for someone who's obviously, I'm intrigued by this idea myself, because I feel like I'm always trying to pinch penny. I'm the total opposite of my wife, and I feel bad, but I'm like the opposite, where I'm just like, we do have goals. We both have goals, sure, but she's like, come on, let's do this. And I'm like, yeah, I want to do that. I want to do all these things, but I'd also like to own a home someday, which we are working towards, but it feels like that goalpost keeps shifting. Mm-hmm. As far as the journal, what would you say to somebody who might be just kind of maybe beginning in that journey to be like, all right, here's the goal I want to accomplish. Let's see what I can do with this journal to kind of get there.
What you would want to do is kind of think today, how much of a down payment am I going to need? If I could buy this house right now, how much of a down payment would I need? So there's a target number you're getting to, and then we can backward engineer it and create a goal for how much you want to save. But people don't do it because they're afraid they're going to have to cut and figure out what to cut out. And the idea behind a journal is just keep track of what you're doing. And as you keep track of what you're doing, then, okay, I can do this, I can make this work. And then I get a raise, and now I've got a little extra, instead of just letting that go off and find some new thing to do. Let me just keep living the life I was and put that, and keep that going. That's one value to the journal. Or you asked the question about buying a house, put aside money, start building up an account. And do you want to have, I say this all the time, you don't want to put everything in your 529 for your kids' education. You don't even want to put everything in your pre-tax retirement account, because life's going to change and things aren't going to go quite in a smooth, perfect manner. And so you want to have some flexibility. So you might be saving for a house, and lo and behold, you have this nice chunk of money you've accumulated, and you're like, you know what, we've been renting, or whatever you're doing, or the house we're in it's actually okay. And now I have this sum of money, and now all of a sudden my goals change and I can apply a different purpose to that. Or I get to that goal and there I am. I've reached the mark. But you've got to, keep that committed. If you're just dropping money into something for really no purpose, no future defined goal, you'll find, well, you know what? We got that house money, quote, house money. And then, you take a vacation with that money. All of a sudden you're back, you're stepping back. That's why your journaling is. What's the purpose of it? And if you make a sacrifice or a trade-off, write that down. And that, was it worth it? And how'd you feel about it? Do it again if it felt good, and learn your lesson if it didn't.
Yeah, and we've had conversations in the past about assigning the money to some objective or something. You know what I mean? Just not just leaving it there to do nothing, and kind of figure out what its purpose is. And I think that can be something that a lot of people nowadays are getting into, where they're like, I have to save, and it's just sitting there, and it's not. I'm sure they have goals, but without a journal, without a clear vision,
right?
It's going to go wherever it's taken in the moment. And I think that's the point. Yeah.
Yep. Dollars are going to find, they're going to find a place to go. It's like water is going to fall through the cracks if you pour it through, the back porch or something like that. You have to, give something a purpose. And what I find, especially with entrepreneurs, I find this is they can pay themselves a regular paycheck, but there's also money that's kind of sloshing around. One month is better than another, or this year's a little bit better. And there's some extra money sitting in the account. And well, I'm going to redo the kitchen, or I'm going to, let's take an extra special trip this year. And if you're not journaling and you're thinking, well, I think I live on this $150,000 a year lifestyle, but when I have a really good year, I go off and I do these other things. Well, the next thing you know, that is your lifestyle. We talked about it before about lifestyle creep. That's really, if you don't put a purpose to it, the dollars are going to creep in a direction that might not be the best for you. Or if you just kept a little bit better track, you would have done something more fulfilling. And then you'd be buying the house and having that much better of a lifestyle later on if you just put it in a particular purpose. Give it a journal, give it a bucket, put it there, decide to stick with it, and then let life go. What happens next month and the month after that, and kind of see how well you can stick to it.
So can you kind of tell me how you would journal this process that you're going through right now, where you're saying, I'm about done paying Penn State money, right?
Yeah,
I'm going through this process. When that concludes, what does that shift and transition look like in the journal? Like, how would you take those, obviously you're done making those payments, there's money there. What's the move with that?
Well, for me personally, what I'm looking at this stage of life is my business has grown and I have more income coming in than I did some years ago. And that didn't change my life. I still live in the same house that I raised my 3 kids in. I have along the way bought a property down at the Jersey Shore. So I have some nice things and I manage them and they're just fine. But the business has grown and I have this extra cash flow. And certainly for anybody who's paying for their kids' education, once that ends, that's extra cash flow. And so I'm sure I could find something to do with that money. My wife and I have discovered that we like getting away to Florida in the colder winters here in Philadelphia. So those are trips that I didn't used to take. But I'm not buying a house in Florida because I can't go there enough for that. And then that wouldn't be a wise. So for me, I'm looking at this excess cash flow and it's building up and I'm investing it. But it kind of built up because first I was like, well, let me have a safety net. Let me have a business cushion. And then that's what I kept doing. Well, next thing my cushion was too big. All right, well, now, do I want to buy a property? Well, no, I just said I have I own a house and another house. That's enough. And so for me, it's how soon and how quickly can I save $1 million? It's the business that I'm in. You're setting money aside, and how can I add to this? And that's certainly there for retirement. And I find that this is so many people. We tell them when they're 20, save, sooner the better. But for many people, you have a lot of excess cash flow in the last 10 years before retirement, or maybe the last 15 years. And so putting that to a purpose. So for me, it's just, putting that aside and really building up and growing the investments even more than I have been, through this period of time. So that's sort of the the flag that I've stuck in the ground, or the beacon that I've put out there that I want to strive to, which isn't different from you saying I want to own a house someday. You need to, hey, I'm just going to shift a couple $100 extra a month and I'm going to put it in this investment account. And if I buy a house someday, it'll be there. And if I don't, maybe that'll help put my kids through college or help me retire or start a business. But right now, I think that's the purpose of it. And as long as you journal that and keep that in mind and don't forget what you're trying to accomplish, you're on your way. So for me, that's what I'm setting aside, is sitting down with my wife and, what do we need, and, how do we want to protect ourselves, and building up. For right now, it's just, we have the cash flow. Let's do it. And that's not any different than you. It's just, you have more time, to build up. So you don't need as much excess cash flow. But the goals are still very, very similar.
So what would you say to someone who might be maybe on the edge of possibly getting a bigger promotion or moving into a career that pays more money than that they've obviously been operating at? Here, I'll just full disclosure. You talk about what you're doing. That's kind of where I'm at in my path right now, where there's been a period where I do kind of feel like I'm kind of spinning my tires career wise, where I'm doing a lot of things, but it's not necessarily correlating into a pay bump as I'm aging. So the saving is just kind of been doing its thing. And I feel like that, especially with inflation and everything like that, the goalpost is moving, like I've said multiple times, but faster than I'm able to accumulate towards that. So what would you say to someone who maybe is on I can see it on the horizon, right? There is avenues to a greater payday in the future. What would you say to somebody who's on the edge of that, and maybe, how can you kind of plan for something like that?
You have to balance the here and now. You want to live a nice life and comfortable life and take care of your family and all the things that you need to do. And it sounds like you have the cash flow to do that. You're I'll use the word adequate. Can we say that?
Yeah.
So that's adequate. So you were spot on. Is as you get a promotion, as you get an increase, as you look at opportunities that might be coming along, maybe it's a side gig or another business. Is it really going to be worth it, or is it just something that's sort of cool, that you like doing, like a hobby almost? And I think you have to weigh that and make a good business decision of, this is my thing, and I'm just going to do it for fun, and it's not going to mess up my world, or no, this is really something I want to pursue. And then that's when you want to get a little more granular into it as a business. And as you do get those promotions, your lifestyle, generally speaking, at some point shouldn't be changing that much. It's hard for you because your kids are young, and as they get older, they require less care from you, but the things they do cost more. That's for sure. That's not inflation. That's just, playing soccer and buying the soccer uniforms and going to, I have people whose kids, they do really well in sports or whatever their activity. And the next thing you know, they're getting on an airplane or taking a weekend and staying in hotels far away. And that's not what they're doing when they're 2 and 3. So, that's part of it. So I think you have to look at those things and say, when my kids are little and I'm paying daycare, when they're 5 or 6 and I'm no longer paying daycare, what am I going to do with that money? That's where a journal, I think, can be really helpful. This is something I can manage and afford to pay now. And when they're not in daycare anymore, all of a sudden I've got an extra, $1,000. I've seen people are spending $2,500, on a couple of kids in daycare. So that's a sum of money that, give it in a journal or in a goal, or if you're writing down your goals, give that a purpose. So you can't save it today, but you can start saving it 5 years from now. I know you're expecting another one. So say 5 years from now, they're on their way to school. So that's where that could come into play. My case, I'm about to pay my last tuition bill, as I said. So I've been doing it. I've got 3 kids, and I only had 1 year where I had a break in that span. So that's money I shouldn't be spending just because. That should be going into my bigger savings goal for me. Or if there was something I really was missing out on that I think I can manage, but I shouldn't be doing it until I knew this day was coming. I knew that I'd be writing this last check. So next fall, I should be writing a check to myself rather than just letting the money kind of filter around, and it'll, like I said, it'll find a purpose. I think that's how you do it. I think that's how you do it. It's if you're living consciously about what you're spending and being a little bit careful, like it sounds like you are, that's really the key. And then when you get a little extra, that's what I already know what it's for before I'm earning it. That's what I think you have to do. And if the goalpost keeps moving and your income isn't going up as much as the cost of living, that's a whole other set of, that's a different question. Are you in the right career? Are you living too high of a lifestyle? Is it, or is that just the way it's going to be? And, put your head down and work through it. And eventually kids will be grown and moved out. And that definitely will come a time when there should be, all things being equal, excess cash flow. So there's going to come a point in time when people should have a little bit more, flexibility in what they're spending, but you just have to identify it in advance so that you do it right, rather than just let it accidentally go to the wrong place.
So obviously that was a little more like nuanced towards me, and I appreciate you taking the time there. Now I feel like I'll write you the check here in a minute. But no, it's good to get that obviously, like you said, we're in different stages of our lives. And I do have a kid on the way, like literally less than a month away. And I know that there's financial ties to that moment when that happens. So there'll be another month or two of like obviously we're planning ahead for that, but it's just, yeah, everything kind of is adding up, and obviously that's how it goes. And I might, like you said, I'm probably over the top when it comes to like, please, can we let's just keep this where it's at. Let's keep doing what we're doing here.
Yeah.
But like you said, there is a good balance. And when I do cave and we do that fun thing, it's a good time. And I wonder why we don't do it more often.
Right. Well, you don't want to sacrifice a nice life today, just to have some big lump sum in the future. And you don't know what the future is going to be like. So I think it's important to enjoy a little bit of both, but that's why I keep track of that. So think about it. You're about to have another child, and maybe you're buying a new bassinet, or maybe the old crib isn't, up to OSHA, whatever,
Well,
whoever makes the crib standards, and you have to buy a new crib. Well, that's where a journal can kind of come in handy. Why was this month so expensive? And, I bought a new crib and I did this and that and the other. Well, unless you're having a new kid every year, you're not buying a new crib every year. And so that's a place where somehow we get through it. I always ask people, well, I had this big expense and I had that big expense. And I'll say, well, it doesn't look like you have a big credit card balance, and, your savings is still kind of where it was. Oh, we just, figured it out. We didn't go out, whatever they did, they don't even think about it. But the fact of the matter is they figured it out and they did it. That's where a journal can really be impactful, is spend the extra money on the crib and feel good about it, that your new baby's in the latest, greatest, safest thing, but also reflect that that's money that you could have saved if you hadn't had that baby. So all things being equal, when you don't have to buy the crib next year, that's money that could be saved. That's a way to identify where this money leaks into different places. It always seems to me that people get by, but they don't know how. And that's one way of identifying where there's some excess cash flow to start socking it away. Once you start saving, you can always bump it up. I always say that if you do $50 a month, you can always bump it up to $100. But if you say, I'm not going to start saving monthly until I can afford to save $1,000 a month, you'll never get there. It's just, you'll never get there.
Yeah. And it did start out that way, I feel like, for me, where I was like, I'm going to get there. And it's eventually you get to that point where you're like, no, I just got to start doing it. And when I started doing it, I got kind of addicted to it. So I'm like, all right, I might not be doing the things that might be fun at the time. And then, like you said, it's got to go back and forth. Let's talk about when a purpose, like maybe at the end of the year, when it's obviously as it is now, when we're recording this, holidays, the tax season, all that stuff. How are you factoring in? Obviously, the holidays, you're carving that out anyway. That's a yearly occurrence. But for tax purposes, how are you using the journal to kind of leverage your taxes when that season comes around, which it is coming here pretty soon?
Yeah, well, a journal can be used in so many different ways, and that's how I envision creating this book, is that it could be put to use in a number of different ways for different people, for different categories or reasons. And that could be one of them, is is some charitable planning, for example, is if you're giving to charity and that sort of part of your annual thing, a lot of people tend to be more charitable, or a lot of times churches are behind on their revenue or their budget because people write big checks at Christmas time. And so that would be an area where you would see, okay, well, what have I done this year? If I was just doing it month by month, did I do something that's tax deductible? And you could kind of look at that at the end of the month. I've made this much in charitable donations. And you know what? If I do a little bit more, I'm going to go over the standard deduction and I'm actually going to be able to use that. And hey, maybe I should explore that. That's where I think, keeping track of those things can be helpful. The other thing, though, you mentioned Christmas spending. That's one of those things is people just always seem to make it work. Oh, I spend this every month. And then Christmas comes and then, January, I always have a big bill. Well, how'd you make that work? I don't know. I made it work. Well, write it down, keep track of it. And then is that a little bit of extra money that you could be saving every month, get to the end of the month, and did you accomplish it? And maybe that is charity, maybe, for tax purposes. Maybe that is money that could go into your IRA and you could take a deduction for the contribution to your IRA, or if you're self-employed, you've got some kind of, a SEP or a simple IRA, something like that. Those are ways where you can start to find, where a journal would help you identify things that you could do before the end of the year.
So obviously this is your idea to supplement your book. I'm just trying to figure out when this came up in your mind.
Yeah.
What were like the main factors that you were thinking, like, this would be really great for blank? Like who do you think would use this the most?
I came up with this idea because this issue, I'll call it problem, is the single biggest or most common thing I run into with anyone that I meet and work with. I start to ask them some information about themselves and their spending habits and their patterns, and they just don't know. And I think most people money comes in and they feel I'm putting money in my 401k, I'm doing this, and I have some money and I spend it, and they don't really think about it too much, and they can always write the check and they always feel comfortable that the next paycheck's coming in and they can live that way. And the issue that I see with that is come retirement, there's not always another paycheck coming in. So you have to know how big the paycheck needs to be from your investment. So that's why what you spend is so, so important. But then I'll also find, I meet people, and I mentioned this already, I think in this conversation, is people who they seem to just do whatever it is they want to do, but they're not saving very much, or maybe we determine they're not saving enough. And, can you save $500 a month? Can you save it? I think so. I should be able to do that. Sure. But well, then why aren't you? Why aren't you doing it? And so that was the idea behind the journal, was just to identify what's coming in and where it's going. And the easiest way to do that is just, what did I spend in total for this month? That's your journal could be as simple as that. Just, this is how much I spent this month, and next month, this is how much I spent next month. And once in a while, those numbers are going to be way out of whack. They're going to be really big or unusually smaller. And you might want to just, well, what happened this month that was a little bit different? And that's where you start to identify where there's some opportunity here. But also you'll find those things that are extra 1 month are extra 1 month every year. So they don't happen every month, but that extra $2,000 you spend every summer to take a nice trip, well, you do that every year. So spread that over the course of a year. There's $200 a month that you're really spending, but you only spend it, once a year on that big trip. That's how you help, you kind of get yourself into a more of a cash flow management. And to me, that's the biggest issue. People can save, they can have dollars, they can have Social Security depositing, they can have all of that. But if they don't know where it's supposed to go, that's where things can get a little bit out of control, and people can fall behind and get themselves into trouble and end up with a credit card balance they can't pay back, or get the child who's college age. And now how the heck do I deal with that? Think ahead and plan ahead. And it's a lot easier if you just think about it and prepare for it. You don't have to sacrifice. You don't have to be the tight Justin, you don't have to be your mom, doing every little nook and cranny of the checkbook. Not that that's a bad thing. Don't get me wrong. But that's the success right there. I think that's we can manage investments, but managing your lifestyle and where your money goes, if you keep track of that, those two put together are a really powerful thing.
And plus, it makes it a lot easier for you, right? When they show up with the journal and you don't even have to.
Yeah.
What happened here on page 14?
Yeah, right,
what is
right,
this?
right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
can you explain this?
Well, I came up with this idea because I've had people that were afraid they couldn't live, without their paycheck. And I told them, just write it down for me. Just every month, tell me what you spent. And they did that. And some months were larger than and then we had a conversation around it. And it came to retirement and said, hey, we've been doing this for several years. And for the last 3 years, on average, you've been spending X. Yes, some months are bigger than others and some months are smaller. Most months are somewhere in a pretty regular, steady number. I was like, oh, I see where that money's going to come from. And it just made them that much more confident in their financial plan. It was just knowing. It was there all along, but they know it. And then they're going to live more comfortably. And that just adds the quality of life. To me, that's what financial planning is going to do. It's going to give you confidence, and that's a better quality of life. And you're going to do all the things you want to do. You're going to raise great kids, send them to college, buy a new house, but you're going to do it because you thought ahead. That's how it works.
I'm going to do it because of the journal.
That's right.
Yes, that's journals. Right. And I'm not like, I'm joking right now. Obviously, I'm messing with you, but like it honestly, people my age and younger, especially, I feel like it's a lost art. Everything is out, like everything is digital. Everything is you're not catching everything. Control F can only do so much on your transactions. But having the big stuff written down, having a goal and seeing it all in one place is invaluable.
Yeah, absolutely. The more technology gets more advanced, the less useful and valuable it becomes almost. You can make all these things at your fingertips, but how trustworthy is the number and the inputs and all of that? And it just kind of, you get wrapped up in the technology of it. So those things are great. I love apps. I check my bank account on the phone. I check, my credit cards and, you pay them right there. I love it. It's the technology is great, but a journal it doesn't capture the why you're doing it, how you feel about it. You can't put goals in those apps, and that's what it's for. So those apps are supportive. The journal's going to get do it old school. But there's no school like the old school, right?
Yeah. Somewhere in the middle, there's a happy medium, and I think the journal's where it's at. I think that's it. What you're trying to say.
Thank you for listening. And if our discussion resonates with you, let's start a conversation about what matters most to you. Go to goodfinancial.com, click contact, and schedule a 30-minute chat. I'd love to hear from you.